Good morning, boys and girls. It's Saturday morning here at St. Agnes, and I'd like to begin a new tradition, and that is Saturday Storytime at St. Agnes. I'd like to start off with a very appropriate book titled The Weight of a Mass, A Tale of Faith. It's a wonderful picture there of a prince talking to his betrothed and his future wife. Here's the inside of the cathedral that we'll see in just a moment. And this, I believe, is Amiens Cathedral. Once upon a time, a king betrothed to a queen from a faraway land consented to be married in the cathedral, even though he knew that only a handful of old women would attend the Holy Mass. It was not that his subjects wished the royal couple ill, or that they would not find their own ways of celebrating the union, but the king's people had grown old and careless in the practice of the faith. You can see the king probably proposing to his future wife. A while before the ceremony, a ragged old widow shuffled into the kingdom's most prosperous bake shop. Subjects soaring in high spirits and decked in finery whisked past her, carrying away the finest confections and loaves of bread. The baker lifted elegant pastries and arranged them in lacy boxes, upon which he tied jaunty bows. His son, a kindly boy, guarded the royal wedding cake from children's probing fingers, all the while describing how he and his father had erected it. So you can see this bake shop with the loaves of bread and the various other pastries. Here he is tying them up with a ribbon. And then in the background, you can see his son protecting the royal wedding cake. Finally, it was the widow's turn in the crowded shop. For the love of God, she begged of the baker, "If you will give me a crust of stale bread, I will offer my mass tonight for you." The baker's son spun on his heels to fetch the bread reserved for children who fed the royal swans. But his father growled, "This woman shares the disease from which you suffer, and your mother before you. If I didn't keep you busy here, I'd find you on your knees in church with the likes of her." Here is the old woman, the son, and the son's father, the baker. A hush fell over the crowd. The baker peered over the counter. "You propose to hear a mass for me?" he challenged the old woman. "I'd rather hear the jingle of your coins." "But I haven't a shilling," the widow whispered. "Then I haven't the bread," the baker shot back. "Father," the son protested. She asked in the name of God. "Then let God provide her bread," the baker exclaimed. Still in the bake shop, there are some shillings that the baker wants. The widow turned to leave, but the baker had not finished taunting her. "Let us see how much bread I would owe you," he said. He tore a tiny corner off his finest tissue paper and read aloud as he formed two minuscule words, "One Mass." And here he is, writing that, one Mass on the corner of some tissue paper, as the dear old woman walks away. The baker held up the tiny piece of paper, and with a ceremonious flair, he laid the wispy scrap onto the resting tray of his brass scale. He then flicked a slice of old bread onto the other tray. He blinked, confused. The bread side had not dropped to lift the lighter paper. If you can tell on the scale, the paper that had the words one mass is heavier than the one piece of bread. And they're all amazed. "Impossible," the baker exclaimed, placing a marzipan apple under the bread side. Still, the tray holding the paper stayed down. The baker piled layered cake on the tray, but this did not tip the scale. He stacked his best cherry-topped cupcakes onto the balance, but they did not make a difference. Brushing past his son, he swept heavy-filled chocolates into a box. Still the scale did not budge when he placed those on it too. He arranged a dozen poppy seed cakes and 24 rolls onto the pile. "The power outweighs his goods," a man exclaimed. Marzipan, boxes of chocolate, rolls, poppy seed. Notice, it's still heavier than all of his confections. The Royal Council of Weights and Measures tested the scale just last week, the baker protested. Something's gone wrong with it. The baker's son lifted the tiny scrap of paper off the scale, and a gasp went up as the baked goods crashed down with a jangle. Everyone began speaking at once. "What can this mean?" they asked each other. The crowd quieted to watch as the baker emptied the heavy tray and tested the scale with all his weights, even those smaller than game pieces. The scale responded to every change, floating up and down. "The scale is correct," a woman exclaimed. "Of course it's correct," the baker bellowed. "I'm an honest man." Now he's got the big weights there, and the weights are showing that the scale is accurate. Notice who's watching from a distance. The older woman. Compelled by this event, clients rushed to the doors, calling in more witnesses from the streets. The baker addressed his son. "Pile it high. This time, turn the scale around so that the trays are switched." The breads and buns, candies and cakes brought their side down with a satisfying thud. "Now," the baker said as he let the snippet of paper float down the new tray, "we'll see the truth." He let the paper drop onto that other side. What's going to happen? See this side piled high? No sooner had the tissue touched the shiny brass tray than it lifted the opposite one. "But I don't understand," the baker muttered as he ran to fetch his freshest donuts. He piled on fruitcakes and cream cakes, berry tarts, and poached pears. "This can't be," he cried as he plastered on plum pudding and candied fruits, almond confetti, and crushed walnuts. "The mass intention weighs more than these," the baker's son marveled. He's carrying down the donuts. The baker was beside himself with bewilderment. He turned to his son. "Don't think I don't know that you would abandon the baking trade to become a priest," he warned. "I don't think any of this will influence me." He took a deep breath. "Bring me the royal wedding cake." As the baker's son rolled the cake's cart through the crowd, it parted respectful lest the prized confection get damaged. And here comes the royal wedding cake. Notice he's using a wheelbarrow to carry it. On the count of 3, the baker ordered his son, "Help me get into the scale. This will put an end to the nonsense." 1, 2, 3. The wedding cake teetered on the top of the pile. The paper on which the baker had written the words, "One Mass," hadn't even fluttered. The baker and his clients stood dumbfounded. They're crushing all of the other confections. Just then, the cathedral bell began tolling the call to the royal wedding mass. The baker's son stood over the piece of paper, staring at it. When he lifted it from the scale, hands surged forward to rescue the wedding cake as the things beneath it crashed down with a weighty clang. A man went out into the street and took up the Ave Maria. The bells were tolling. Other clients, who had intended to celebrate the royal wedding in diverse ways, now filed out and processed toward the kingdom's great cathedral. One by one, they joined the masculine voice in raising the lofty hymn. Here are the people going out. Here's the cake. The stunned baker saw that the only customer left in his shop was the old widow. He made a gesture of putting everything at her disposal. "Come every day," he told her. "You will never go hungry again." The widow smiled and tucked only a thin piece of bread into her pocket. As the baker watched his son unbutton his white apron, the father sensed that one day the boy would be exchanging it for a white collar. Here is the old woman putting the one slice of bread away. And there's the boy and the father. Apparently the cake was saved. The baker, his son, and the widow trailed the procession to the cathedral to offer Mass with their monarchs. Amidst the singing and the exclamations of wonder and joy, the baker asked the old lady, "Why did you take only a slice when you could have had anything and everything in my shop?" "I was ashamed to take more," the widow told him. "Ashamed?" the baker asked. "But it was you who believed in God's power while the rest of us had grown cold." "I was ashamed," the widow exclaimed, "because even though I had never given up going to Mass, I asked you only for a crust of stale bread in exchange for it." Here they are, going off to the wedding. You can tell it's evening now. By the way, these house designs are what are called half timber, plaster and timber. "You see, my friend, like you, I too do not know the weight of a Mass." Here they are entering into the church. Here's a wonderful stained glass window of the Holy Eucharist and the chalice. The last picture we have on the end cover is, of course, the elevation, or it's the Ecce Agnus Dei at Mass. And this, the bishop, is showing our Lord to everyone at the royal wedding. The end. May God bless you and keep you.